everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of the Uncorked Corner podcast. Tonight, we are very excited to be welcoming Doug Filipponi from Ancient Peaks Winery. He is the co-owner and viticulturist over there, and we are so excited to introduce him to you all. But we'll get started by having you introduce yourself, give us a little bit of background, and tell us how you got into all this wine excitement.
Well, first, thank you both for having me and Ancient Peaks on your podcast here tonight or today or this morning, whatever time of day you're listening to it. So a little bit about myself. I'm a native here. I was born in Paso, Robles, and went to school in the local schools, then on to Cal Poly to study ag business management, which I did do. And it has come very handy in the rest of my life's work here. Started a water well drilling company out of college, and that introduced me to a lot of folks that were coming to Paso Robles in the 80s, trying to find land and water to plant varietal wine grapes. So being inquisitive, I questioned those folks, and they were very convinced that this was the best place in the whole world to plant varietal wine grapes. So having been in agriculture myself and my drilling company partner, Ned Thompson, we planted Cabernet starting in 1989. So been a viticulturist planting grapes since 89, planted, probably over those years, well over 1,000 acres of grapes over the years. And in 2000, which is the turn of the century, we bought the Santa Margarita Ranch here in Santa Margarita, which is at the very southern end of the Paso Robles AVA. And at that time, we actually had the Robert Mondavi family as a lease holder, and they planted about 780 acres on the Santa Margarita Ranch to 7 varieties, mostly Bordeaux. All the Bordeaux varieties plus Zinfandel and Syrah. And in 2005, we ended up buying that lease back from the Mondavi Corporation, which at that time sold the lease back to us after having planted that acreage. And we took it back, and we actually had the first harvest in 2005 and created Ancient Peaks from that harvest, launching the brand in 2007 with my partners at that time, Rob Rossi and Carl Whitstrom. And I had been drilling wells for them over the many years that we've been friends and partners. And so we joined up together in 2001 and started this partnership we still have today.
Perfect. Well, it sounds like you started off really in agriculture and grew into the wines when by opportunity, an opportunist jumped on that area. So what was it like there? 2005, you do the first harvest in learning how to start actually turning those grapes into wine.
Well, that was the first harvest for Ancient Peaks. I'd had many harvests prior with the grapes that we planted in the early 90s. And I can tell you the excitement of the first harvest. I can still feel it today. You go through, it takes 4 years, 3 to 4 years from the time you rip the ground till the time you pull that fruit off. And it's really a great feeling to just taste the fruit, and then even better to have it made into wine. So to answer your question for Ancient Peaks and for the Margarita Vineyards from Santa Margarita Ranch, we took a beautiful harvest off in 2005. It was the longest harvest period in many years prior. We actually took the last of the grapes off just prior to Thanksgiving. So it was quite a long harvest extended period, and the weather was perfect, and the 2005 vintage was well regarded.
And your area is known for a pretty unique soil types and just the environment that you're within. Can you tell us a little bit about what makes it different?
Yes. So starting with where we're located, and I do have a little map here that you might be able to see if I hold it up. I don't know if you can see that. Can you see that okay? At the very southern end this Paso AVA, which is right at 614,000 acres. We're at the very southern end where the star is, and 14 miles from the Pacific Ocean. So that's where the ranch is located, and it actually has its own nested AVA within the AVA of Paso Robles called Santa Margarita Ranch. So that terroir, so to speak, is very unique in that we have these 5 distinct soil types, which once again, if you can see them at the bottom of the page there's these 5 very distinct soil types within this area that their grapes are planted in. So within a 3 by 5 mile area, there are these 5 very distinct types of soil, starting with the ancient seabed, of which I have a oyster fossil right here, which is 93% calcium, and it's 14 million years old. This is just a piece of it. This thing would probably be about this long, but it's 93% calcium and highly impregnated in the soils where this particular soil type is located on the vineyard. As a matter of fact, the Oyster Ridge you'll be tasting later comes from that location where these soils are prevalent. And we also have this Monterey Shale Formation, which is a kind of a well-regarded formation in the Paso Robles area. A lot of producers are on that Monterey Shale. It's highly regarded for extraordinary grape quality, as well as volcanics on the western slope of our ranch, and then the granitics on the eastern slope. So in the middle, there's a rocky alluvium that's kind of like what you might call a stream channel from ancient times, that's just full of those remnants of all of those soils, which lend themselves to different characteristics in the wines. So the soil types on this one ranch are extremely rare to have that many soil types in one vineyard. Then to top that off, being so close to the ocean, we have these diurnal swings of over 50 degrees, sometimes 55, 60 degrees, where it'll be 90 degrees during the day, where we get the warmth to ripen these grapes. And then at night, it'll swing clear down into the 40s. So we have these huge swings, and earlier in the day than most places in the world due to the proximity of the ocean. So we're blessed with the warmth to be able to ripen, but then have that cooling early enough to where it stops the sugar process and allows the grapevine to put more character into the grapes. So those are a couple of things that are unique to the Santa Margarita Ranch, and being its own nested AVA. It has to have those characteristics to become an AVA to itself.
And now jumping more into the actual formation, turning those grapes into the wines, is there any other unique processes or things that you do that separates your wines from others in your region?
I would say that one of the things that we do with our picking process is we're picking with a sorting head picking equipment. When we use mechanical harvesters, we're picking the grapes where it will sort the fruit on the machine and then dump the stems and small berries and any odd berries off back into the vineyard, so they go back into the soil. And then just the grapes that we want for the fermentation process end up in the tank. That's one thing. We do also hand harvesting as well, but they're for specific programs. So I would say, as far as just in the harvesting process or growing the grapes, we do have our own setup there for making compost, etc., from our neighbor that makes compost for us, and it ends up back in the vineyard off the grape stems that we deliver to them from the process. So we do have that process that's kind of unique to the vineyard.
And at this time now, what varietals of grapes are you currently growing on the property?
Well, we have a fair number of grapes. We have about 19 varieties. So we grow everything from Chardonnay to Zinfandel. We have all of the Bordeaux varieties, the 5 majors. We have Syrah, Petit Syrah, Pinot Noir, Sauvignon Blanc, Viognier, Sangiovese, Nebbiolo, Primitivo, regular Zinfandels from the Deaver clone and the Rockpile clone. And I'm sure there's 1 or 2 others, Muscat Canelli and a couple of others. So we grow a little bit of everything, and it's because of the fact that the soils and the weather allow us not only to grow Pinot Noir, but to ripen Cabernet. It's kind of a unique property.
I was going to ask, so you're growing quite a few different grape varietals, and I'm sure you've tried all sorts of different wines, just learning like what tastes right and how to get the right blends and all of that. We have some good ones here that we're going to taste shortly, but I was curious from not so much like the professional standpoint, but before you started, really getting into this industry, were you a big wine connoisseur yourself, or did you kind of become more of one through work?
Well, that's a great question, because being of Swiss Italian descent, my grandfather and my dad always made wine, over from the local grapes from the time we were very young, that I can remember. I'm sure they made it for hundreds of years, but so having tasted wine that was made from the local grapes from the time I was probably 10, 12 years old, until we got into the period where lots of local wine was being produced. There were only a few wineries in the Paso Robles area in the earlier years. There was the Rodas and Pizzentis. A couple of York Mountain had a vineyard, but it was pretty obscure back in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And then in the 80s, and there became more prevalent in 90s. And of course, now we're home to probably 300 plus wineries in the Paso Robles region, all the way from a couple of hundred cases to up to close to 1 million plus cases. So I think the bigger part of my wine career started after we started actually growing the grapes in the 90s. And that got me more interested in the different varieties and the different regions, having been to Italy and France and Croatia and other places in the world. I haven't been to South Africa, I've been to Australia, but tasting the wines from other places is also gives you a feeling of their terroir, their uniqueness as well.
One place you mentioned there that I was fortunate enough to visit not too many years ago, about 4 years ago, was Croatia. And I had never heard anyone mention Croatia as sort of a wine destination. So now I'm going to be on a hunt for a wine that was made in Croatia, actually. So any recommendations? Do you have any recommendations?
There was nothing I could pronounce.
No, yeah.
I wouldn't be able to pronounce it right now if I tried, but we did try their wines. And, of course, we're a little bit home palated here in California. We like the way our wines taste and the acidity, et cetera. Pero, you got to also try other wines from different places. I've even tried wines down in Mexico. So you got to give everybody their shot at your palate.
Absolutely. And to get into the palate, so I regret to inform you that right now I'm a little stuffy here and my nose isn't on point. So I'm not going to have the full tasting experience that I usually like to have, but I have opened the bottle of Merlot. So that's the first one that I'm drinking here. So it's the 2020 Merlot here from you. So take us through this wine, first of all, while I'm drinking it and tasting it to the best of my ability for today, on what, people can typically experience from an expert like yourself.
Well, I'm gonna tell you that's one of my favorite wines just to enjoy by itself out on the in the front porch, watching the birds fly by. That Merlot is just so pleasant. It's nice and round in the mouth. It's got that great fruit, but it's not overly fruity. It has kind of a dark cherry kind of a fruit flavor for me, and I enjoy the roundness in the mouth. It's not soft or flabby. It definitely has nice tannin structure. It's probably what I would call a cab drinker's Merlot, someone that enjoys Cabernet and likes a little more body and tannin structure. However, it's got great acidity as well and a wonderful food wine. But yeah, the Merlot and the Santa Margarita Ranch is probably one of the best places in Paso Robles region to grow Merlot. And primarily because of the cooler climate and shorter hot days. So Merlot does very well. And we've actually planted more Merlot on the ranch since the infamous movie that kind of took a couple of swipes at it. So we've been adding Merlot to the vineyard over the years because it does so well and because it's such a great grape. And it's typically going to be in most of the wines that you taste that are Bordeaux wines coming out of Paso. You'll find a lot of Merlot in it.
And on that, the first thing that hit me when I took my first sip of this was that smoothness, that roundness of it from start to finish. When it first hits your tongue to the time it's going down your throat and into you, it is a very, very smooth, pleasant wine to drink. Pleasant, hits the nail on the head. It's got a fruitiness and a sweetness, but without being overly sugary. And then you do have some complexity in there as it sits in your tongue and goes down, but it doesn't have any sort of bitterness, and it's not overly dry on the finish as well. I do think it's an excellent wine. I can definitely see this being a good sipper out on the porch watching some birds.
Yeah, it's a great wine, I'll tell you. And we put it in it ends up in our Cabernet and in our Oyster Ridge as well. And you'll find it in a lot of other wines other than the Merlot. But a standalone wine, that Merlot will stand up to any of the others that have come out of California, I believe.
And speaking of the Merlot, you did mention the Oyster Ridge, so that's the one that I have open here for the red, and that has quite a few different grape varietals in there. So can you tell us that I very rarely see a blend that has so many flavors, and I think that that's really awesome. So can you tell us a little bit about how that kind of makes the flavor profile different? And then I have my glass here, which I already had a taste of, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful taste.
Thank you. Well, and the more you swirl that, the more layers will come out of it. And that's due to the fact that not only is it a Cabernet based wine, it's a Bordeaux varietal wine, a Bordeaux blend, which would normally be called a Meritage blend, but we just call it Oyster Ridge because of where it comes from. And so every one of these blocks in the vineyard that are red blocks dedicated to the Oyster Ridge line of wine will be hand harvested, number one, in the finish, hand selected. It will be small box, all hand sorted, ready back at the winery, and hand punch downs. The bottle, you probably have the bottle sitting there. It's a beautiful package. It's the best of what we grow. And so in 2016, I asked our winemakers, and it's always nice to have a little dribble of wine on there because it shows that you're going to enjoy, you've been enjoying the what's in the bottle. Yes. So in 2016, we actually made the first one that was on all Bordeaux blend. Prior to that, it could have been Syrah, it could have had Zinfandel in it, it had Petit Syrah in it, but always has been Cabernet based. Well, we are members of the Paso Robles Cab Collective, and I've been the president of the collective now for seems like about 6 or 7 years. And so I asked our winemakers to, if they could make the Oyster Ridge blend solely from our Bordeaux, that if they could do it and maintain the quality, to please do it. And since 2016, every year now, it's been a blend of Cabernet, Merlot, Cab Franc, Petit Verdot, and Malbec. main Bordeaux varieties. And so all of those wines come together to just create that experience you've got in your glass right there. And each component adds its own layer of flavor, number one, and also texture and tannin structure and acidity in your mouth. But it's a real pretty wine. But I challenge you to keep a glass of that around and swirl it, and in 10 or 15 minutes it will taste different. Trust me. And it's a lovely wine. Thank you for trying it.
Absolutely.
I was just going to tell you, I actually had the Chardonnay. I thought we were going to start there.
I have that one. I have that one here too, but we kind of did start backwards. But Nick doesn't like to do things the traditional way, so that's okay.
It's okay. Hey, I'm on your side. Whatever, as long as it tastes good, that's all I care about. But whatever wine you want to talk about next, I'm up for.
Well, since you have the Chardonnay in front of you, and I also have the Chardonnay bottle in front of me, for anybody who's looking at the video. Can you tell us about this? Talk us through it, and it's good. I've already had a taste of this one too, but it was very refreshing. I had it chilled before I took it out, so it has a nice little cool to it.
Yes, it should be. I like it chilled. It should be very refreshing in the mouth. This wine, it's not going to be your big buttery Chardonnay. We don't make it that way. Our Chardonnay, which you have in your glass right now, and showed us that beautiful bottle of it. We've been growing Chardonnay since about 2006. And when we started the brand and launched in 2007, we launched with a Sauvignon Blanc because, first of all, there's a lot of Chardonnay out there in the world. And so we thought, Sauvignon Blanc being more of a warmer climate wine that people would accept it a little better, which they do, by the way, and it's done very well. So a few years later, we were growing the Chardonnay, and the Chardonnay is excellent off the ranch. I mean, it's got beautiful green apple and nice acidity. We decided to launch a Chardonnay, and we wanted to launch a Chardonnay that people like to drink. So we made sure that we included a small amount of barrel fermented Chardonnay, fermented in French oak, and then blended that with our tank fermented Chardonnay, so that we have not only the beauty of the Chardonnay fruit and the acidity and that crispness, but also the roundness in the mouth from the barrel fermented Chardonnay that's gone through malolactic fermentation, which actually softens it a little bit. So you kind of get the best of both worlds with this Chardonnay, and it is a crowd pleaser.
Awesome. And to talk about the fourth one we have here, so I haven't personally opened it. I'm still working on that delicious Merlot, but I have the 2020 Cabernet Sauvignon here as well. I'm saving this one to cook up. One of my favorite things to do with wine. I rarely will open a bottle of wine on a weekday. It's typically more of a weekend thing when I have time to prepare a good meal and drink it alongside a good meal. So let's talk about the Cabernet. I haven't opened it yet, but take us through some of the tasting notes. And then I want you to give some of your favorite meal pairings for this one. And if you have a couple to throw out for the other ones that we've talked about here as well, that would definitely be welcome.
Okay. Well, starting with the Cabernet, the Cab Sauvignon off of Santa Margarita, it's not going to be a big, giant, luscious fruit bomb. It's going to be more restrained, but have nice black fruits in it, black currant. You can even pick up blackberry, et cetera, in the fruit components of the wine, but great acidity. Again, because of our cooler climate, we have higher acid wines, which are food friendly. And any chef will tell you that if you want to blend a wine with food, you want a higher acid wine to kind of cut whatever the fats and that sort of thing you will have in your, what I'm going to say, it's going to be red meat with the Cabernet. Myself, I would say a ribeye steak with that Cabernet Sauvignon, it's hard to beat. It's got the acidity to cut through the marbling and the meat, and it's also got nice tannin structure as well to kind of rinse out the mouth when you've had a nice big old bite of good old Angus beef. We grow those on the ranch as well. So the ranch has been a cattle ranch since the Padres were there in the 1770s. So we want to make our wines taste good with food. Every wine that we make is going to be food friendly. So the Merlot, I would say any kind of lamb or lighter meats like lamb or pork with the Merlot is wonderful pairing, as well as a lot of vegetarian dishes go very well with it. Anything that has tomato base vegetarian dishes do very well with the Merlot. As far as the Oyster Ridge, there's not a thing I can think of that you can't eat without that. I mean, I forgot to mention salmon for the Merlot. I love the Merlot with salmon. Again, if you're eating king salmon and it's got nice fat content, it's great to have that Merlot with the acidity and in the combination with the meat from the king salmon as well. The Chardonnay, any kind of seafood, halibut strikes me as the best fish variety for the Chardonnay. I love Thai food with the Chardonnay as well because of the spiciness of Thai food, or at least that's the way I like it. And then the calmness, so to speak, that comes over you when you wash that down with a little glass of Chardonnay. The Oyster Ridge, again, any kind of dish is going to go well with that. I mean, it's just such a great wine. It's hard not to like whatever you're eating when you're washing that down. I can tell you that right now. So I think that's the 4 that you have in front of you.
Exactly, that's right. And you're tugging on all my heartstrings there. The Cabernet, definitely ribeye. You're right on the money. That's what I'm going to end up going for with that. The Merlot, bringing up the salmon. Now, most of what we have here is over the Atlantic salmon, but we eat salmon at least once a week. So I'm going to have to hold on to this one. And in the next day or 2 here, hopefully cook some up to have that. And then Bianca has the Chardonnay over there. And I know they're a big fish family over there. So they're going to be eating a lot of that. And I'm sure there's plenty lying around.
I'm having it with a carbonara tonight. I don't know if that's like not recommended, but that's what we planned on cooking.
Well, I'm going to look forward to you sending me a little text or an email. Let me know how that went. I'm sure it's going to be good.
I wasn't sure what to pair with it. And I said, hey, you know what? The Chardonnay is probably going to be great with it. So we're going to roll with it. And then we'll be tagging you guys and everything that we're sharing anyway, because Nick knows I'm always over here taking pictures of my plates before they're consumed. So
wonderful. That's wonderful.
And that's very cool. I don't think that's something that we've had a lot of wineries come on and say, is that they also have like cattle on their property where they can actually, really enjoy that very almost like a holistic experience of being able to have everything so homegrown, I guess, if that's the right word for it. So I imagine it's just a totally different experience being able to, drink your wine and have your meat from the same area and just really be like personally immersed in that plate and just knowing where everything comes from.
Yeah, it is. It's gratifying. The ranch, I didn't tell you, but earlier on, is that it started out as a mission property, became a Mexican land grant, and then it's been a cattle ranch ever since the 1770s. So we run our own sustainably grown Angus cattle on the ranch today, as cattle have been here for over 250 years. So we're very conscious about sustainability. Our wines are all sustainably farmed, and we incorporate solar and wind for lots of our needs. So we look at water very cautiously, because being in the water well business all those years, I know how precious it is. So we have to do everything as efficiently as we can to save those resources. Usually the Merlot comes off ahead of the Cabernet, but this year we just finished our Cabernet. After the Merlot comes off, then we're going into the Petit Verdot, and we will finish that Friday night, and then let's see, Sunday and Monday will be the Sunday or Monday is the Cabernet Franc will come off, and then we'll be all finished. So it's been a long 2 months.
Sounds like it must be a lot of work.
It is. It's, you work all year long to get to this point. And so it's gratifying when the last of it's in the tank and you can say to yourself, we made it. We didn't get rained out. We didn't get frozen. We didn't get snowed on. Whatever the worst things that can happen didn't happen. And the 2022 vintage will be in the barrel here pretty quick.
Well, that's a beautiful thing, and we can't wait to taste the fruits of your labors there with that wine. Thank you again so much for coming on tonight, Doug, and sharing Ancient Peaks with us. The wines that we tasted, I know I've really enjoyed the Merlot that I've opened, and Bianca enjoyed hers as well. We're definitely going to take some pictures pairing up with some foods coming forward and sharing them around. So we'll look forward to sharing that with you as well. Cheers and you have a good night.
Cheers.
Don't forget to leave a comment, subscribe, rate, and review on whatever podcast platform you prefer. Thanks for listening.